Welcome to The Joy Factor, a podcast dedicated to helping you create a path to joyful living each and every day. We're sharing inspiration from real people combined with practical tools you can use to unleash the playful and joyful spirit already inside you. Now, here's your host, therapist, life coach, and yoga teacher, Julie Hansen.
Hello and welcome to the Joy Factor podcast. My guest today is Jana Glass. Jana started her career working with children and families struggling with mental health issues. She has experience in a variety of settings, including in-home therapy, outpatient therapy, day treatment, and residential care. She founded Supportive Solutions 12 years ago to support people managing depression, anxiety, substance abuse, trauma and abuse, infertility, and grief. Although she works with a wide spectrum of clients, her special interests include healing trauma, substance abuse, and maternal mental health, prioritizing this population, including infertility, miscarriage, difficult births, pre- and post-partum depression, anxiety, and obsessive-compulsive disorders. Jana is acutely aware of the challenges that can accompany individuals and couples on their journey to become parents. She struggled with infertility for over 3 years that included painful experiences of multiple miscarriages, surgeries, and invasive reproductive assistance interventions, hospital bedrest, a difficult birth, a NICU stay, as well as postpartum mood challenges. Jana was able to find healing through family and community support, along with Brainspotting therapy. All right, welcome, Jana.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
We are ready to have a conversation here in the Joy Factor that really is going to hone in on, your work that you have done and your own healing journey along your struggle of infertility and all of the challenges that went along with that.
Absolutely. I think that this is an area that needs to be talked about more. I think that there is so much information put out there around just the joyful part of trying to start a family. And so, sure, there's some people that's absolutely their story, is that they get pregnant the first time they try, they have an uneventful pregnancy, they have the birth that they wanted and a child that's ideal for them. And I think that's a percentage of the population, but I think that a much larger percentage experiences challenges at some point on their journey along the way. And so I think a lot of times people feel alone in those experiences, whether those are mental health challenges or fertility challenges. And I think the more open that people are willing to be and the connections that we're able to create, that's where the real healing can happen, as opposed to feeling like something you're doing is wrong or that you yourself are wrong because you're having thoughts or feelings that don't match the joyful part of parenting. And look, that part exists for everyone, but I think it's also unrealistic to make it seem like all the commercials and all of the social media posts would portray parenthood and the way that you get there. So I love opening up discussions and trying to normalize processes that happen for far many more of us than is often talked about.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your own journey and kind of how Brainspotting was woven into your healing, and just interested in your story.
For sure. And so, as you kind of referenced, I did end up having a long journey to parenthood. It was very painful and it was full of a lot of disappointments and challenges personally. We experienced 3 separate losses before we were able to conceive and actually have twin girls, which were such a blessing. But through that process, once you have the losses on the front end, it definitely alters your ability to enjoy subsequent pregnancies. even the most common grounded people, because your experience has not ended the way you had hoped, it's really hard to keep that hope in the front because your experiences in life have taught you that things don't end the way you had hoped they would. And so, for me, during that time, ironically, in my career, I was supporting people who were going through all these different perinatal challenges, and then I myself faced them. And so I had already been trained in Brainspotting, which is an amazing healing approach. And so I was already in therapy to begin with for Brainspotting. And so for me, when it came to having all of these events that were just unbelievable to me, that I couldn't believe that all we wanted to do was be parents. And so we had no idea that we could be facing so many different challenges along the way. And so Brainspotting really allowed me to process through each piece of those traumas that I experienced and allowed myself to get a nervous system reset, if you will, so that I could enjoy the last pieces of my pregnancy. And then a lot of people don't get the birth that they had hoped for, but unfortunately for me, my blood pressure had risen quite high. And so the decision was made to give me some medication that made me quite ill. And so we had a C-section, but at the same time, we were told that I was going to be separated from my children for 24 hours. So they were going to be in the NICU and I was going to be watched very closely because I had been given magnesium sulfate. And so for me, I had waited at that point so many decades to become a mom. And so to find out in that moment of vulnerability that I was not going to be with my children just absolutely was devastating. And so I grabbed my doctor and I said, if they're medically stable, please let them stay with me as long as possible. And I got about 15 minutes with them, and then they were taken off to the NICU. And anyone who's taken magnesium sulfate knows the next 24 hours were very unpleasant. But once the time hit for me to be able to go see them, I was like saying, "Where's that wheelchair? Come on!" And went up and saw them as soon as I possibly could, and obviously tried to be with them as much as possible from that point. But it was really devastating, and I had never really thought about what it would be like to have a child in the NICU or two children in the NICU. And for me, one difficult thing that people really blew off as far as the impact was one of my children came home first. And so I had a newborn at home and I had a newborn in the hospital. And I had a C-section, so I couldn't drive. And so I was reliant on people to take me and my first newborn to go visit my second newborn and provide care to both of them all day. And then I had to leave my baby at the hospital and go back home with my other baby. And so people would say things like, oh my gosh, but she's getting the best care possible. Like she's getting 24-hour care. Like she's getting fresh people every shift, right? Like what more could you want? And I felt so unseen and so not heard because for me, it was absolutely devastating to leave her behind. And so being able to engage in the Brainspotting process makes that where I can talk about this. Like it feels like it happened to me, but it feels like a long time ago, where at the time it was so upsetting and so devastating. And so just having that skilled therapist who provided that support for me allowed me to be able to process that event through to completion. So now it's just a fact of my life and it doesn't hurt anymore. But I can tell you at the time it was so upsetting, and I just got a bunch of platitudes from people and a lot of, instead of someone just saying to me, oh my gosh, that's awful, let me give you a hug, I hate that you have to leave your baby behind, it was more all the reasons why it was good too. And so my logical mind knew that. I knew that that was the absolute best place for her, but my heart felt like it was being ripped out of my body every time I had to leave. And so that's what Brainspotting really does, is when your head and your heart don't match, it helps them be able to realign and you get a more cohesive understanding. And so it stopped that pain for me, and allowed me to look back on that experience as something that I overcame and that was just part of our story, and that I can use that to try to help and support other people who face difficult things, who go unseen. I mean, people would say things to me like, well, isn't it great that you got to go home and rest a little bit and someone else was taking care of your kids? Because at one point I went home without both of them, right? And it was like, no, I've been waiting to do this. Like, I don't want someone else to take care of my children. They were trying to like expound the virtues, right? Of like why it was really good to have children in the NICU. And I can assure you that you will be hard pressed to find any parent who, if there was a medically stable choice of being home or away, is going to choose away. But everyone tried to figure out how to make the situation look better to me instead of just validating how hard it was. And these are people who loved me. And so I guess I'm saying that, lessons learned of just around things that can be more supportive of people who are facing difficulties, and being able to know when something is beyond what friends and family can support you with, and when it's time to go seek outside support from a skilled clinician who has good experience in the area of which you need help with.
Yeah, so you're touching on a few different areas, but one really important piece is, what do you say to someone? What are the ways to be supported? And you've mentioned a couple of things. Is there anything else, just generally speaking, for people that are listening who may have loved ones, or find themselves in the future? What are the best things to say to someone?
I mean, I think more importantly than saying something, it's really listening and really trying to understand that person's experience of the situation, even if it's different than what you would have of the same situation. And being able to hear, like, when I say this is so hard to leave her, being able to say, wow, it's so hard for you to leave her. I'm so sad that you're experiencing this. Well, because nobody could make it better in the moment. And so words aren't going to suddenly have me go, oh, you're right. Okay, I feel totally fine leaving her there, right? And so it's more showing that you care, showing that you are present and can handle what I have to say and hear, and it matters to you, and that's going to be way more important than any right words. Words would be like, you can call me anytime, or I'm here for you, or I hear your experience. Those kinds of words are going to be a lot more effective than trying to reframe it or have it look better or feel better to the person. Things look different when you're on the other side of it, but when you're in it, it's really, really hard to be with anything except how you feel. And so validating that and, just showing up every time and saying, I'm here and I love you. It matters.
It does matter. That's wonderful and so important. We can always use a reminder on that. Tell us more about Brainspotting. And I love to hear how other practitioners describe it and talk about it. And so tell us more about that for the many people who don't know.
So my definition of Brainspotting, which, by the way, I do want to mention our founder and the person who discovered Brainspotting is Dr. David Grand. And so back in 2003, he was working with an athlete and ended up discovering this process. And so I'll tell you a little bit about it, but I want to make sure that that he is recognized in this process. So to me, Brainspotting is a very powerful brain and body-based approach. It harnesses the body's natural ability to heal. And it's based on the principles of where you look affects how you feel. And so what we mean by that is there's actually a fixed point in space that if you look in that direction, you will feel differently in different spots. And so people have lots and lots and lots of different brain spots. And in this context, when we talk about it, it's if you have a challenge that you have tried a lot of talk therapy around or different therapies and you're not getting your outcome, often it is because there is some part of a past event that you've experienced that was really upsetting that didn't process through to completion on a brain level. And so there's a piece of that that's still stuck that needs to process through to completion. And so brain spotting allows that to happen. And so it allows you to target a specific area that you want to focus on. It really follows the principles of identifying the area, feeling where you feel that in your body, and then finding that corresponding eye position that helps you access that particular brain spot in your brain. And so your brain is amazing and it knows how to heal. We're just setting up the optimal conditions to be able to make that happen. And so having a strong therapeutic alliance with the person that you're working with, and that person really being present and following your pace as the client and going where it is you want to go. A brain spotting therapist really approaches the situation with a lot of curiosity. And we are taught not to make assumptions about situations. We can have ideas and we can have thoughts about what might be going on, but it's our job to kind of withhold those thoughts to see where the process takes us. What I love about brain spotting is that it's really based on this uncertainty principle, that we never really know where the session's going to go. But what we do know is the person is going to heal. We just don't know how that's going to look, what that's going to look like, or how quickly that's going to occur. But it's such a beautiful principle to take into our world right now when so many things are so uncertain and there's so many things that we don't have the answers to. It just blends beautifully with literally every aspect of our lives. And so, through this process and that focus, mindfulness, and that brain spot, you're able to process through those pieces that have been upsetting or have been things that activate you now in the present, even though they're about something from the past. And so what happens with trauma a lot of the times is that even though something may have happened years ago, if it remains unresolved, it feels like it's today. And so a lot of my clients will say, oh my gosh, like once we process through and they feel better and they feel like that is no longer a pressing issue for them, they'll say, gosh, now that feels like 10 years ago. It's like it takes its rightful place in that timeline, which is such a powerful feeling because it felt so ever present. And now it feels like, yeah, that happened to me, but now it feels like a long time ago. And so it allows you to then operate from a calm, grounded place and not with that unfinished business still present in front of you. So when we're talking about healing perinatally, if you did have a loss, if you're able to find that healing and that grounding, it doesn't mean it's not a factor at all in the next pregnancy, but allows you to come from a much more calm, grounded place. And you're able to experience that pregnancy, the second pregnancy, differently and have more hope of a different outcome. We never really know, but to rob someone of a second pregnancy because a first pregnancy didn't see all the way through is also really another level of loss. And so we want to try to work with folks to help them enjoy as much of their next stage of pregnancy, giving birth and parenting as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. One of the things for me, just having gone through my own brain spotting, which of course made me want to become trained in brain spotting, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Is that I just realized, and I just realized one day, wow, you had a new thought.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So same situation, but no longer feeling like I had to be in fight or flight mode. I didn't have to, prepare for worst case scenario. I had a thought, what if this turns out better than expected? Right? Isn't that something?
How about that? And so it is. And so I think, sometimes we get stuck in a neural network loop, right? Where we connect certain things. Like if A happens, then we're going to do B, then C, then D, right? And so, if you're used to things always ending badly, then you get stuck in that loop of, well, I'm sure this isn't going to turn out the way I want because it never does, right? And so brain spotting, our brains are amazing. And there is neuroplasticity and neurogenesis of us being able to create new neurons and new neural connections in order to change some of that thinking and that approach. And so that was a new neural connection for you of, oh, well, maybe there is an alternate ending and maybe it's not the worst case scenario. And so in between sessions, like when I recheck in with clients, a lot of times the shifts can be subtle that way, where they're like, all of a sudden I was like, maybe this will work out, but even that possibility is huge. They still may not be like, it will work out, but even creating the space for it to be different, then allows people to have more possibilities, which breeds more hope. And that just having more possibilities is enormous for people.
So for those parents out there right now who are, just in the middle of a pandemic and maybe have already had loss and are now on the parenting journey, what thoughts do you have? What are some, if somebody were listening and just feels, well, yeah, but I'm over here and I can't feel joy for this pregnancy in the same way that I would, because there's this loss and I'm still grieving that, and people don't get it.
And so, I think this is the challenge with us needing to be physically distant right now in a lot of scenarios, is that it does make us feel more alone. And so I think for people who are feeling not enough hope right now and who would like to have more of that, I think it's about really trying to make whatever connections are safe, meaning if you're currently pregnant, you may have to connect with people through electronic means. And so it's being able to capitalize on what you do have available to you, whether that's a form of a support group, whether that's more just regular mom friends, whether that's one friend, but really trying to fight against the feeling of isolation and loneliness by making those connections. Because I think that that's where we keep that forward momentum through that hope, through the joy pieces, but when I say safe, I'm talking about people who you can say, like, I kind of want to kill my kid right now. And them being able to say, I felt that way yesterday, right? Like, not that you're literally going to bring harm to your child, but that, nobody gave us the solid parenting manual to begin with. And there's definitely not one of how to parent during a pandemic, or how to be pregnant during a pandemic, because we're all learning as we go. And so giving yourself a lot of self-compassion and a lot of grace, and being able to even break your day down into smaller segments of the day of, okay, so now we're going to go do these things, and here's one thing that I can do that's just for myself, even if it's not what I would really want to be doing. Like, what would I rather be doing? I'd rather go have a group fitness class. Okay, well, that's probably not going to happen right now, but what can I do that is at least close to that, and trying to meet that need. There was always a lot of online support. I think more people are seeking online support because of more necessity around it. And so, if you try something and it's not the right fit for you, keep trying. I think that's another tendency, is that people will try one thing and then feel like, well, that didn't work, so that I'm just done with that. It's like, okay, there will be something out there that is the right fit. It just might take a little bit of time and effort to find that. There's a lot of really talented and skilled clinicians that are out there. If you're focusing on the perinatal realm, Postpartum Support International is a wonderful resource, and they actually have a provider directory. And they list people by area, a lot of times whether that they take insurance, if they're doing telehealth, etc. But there is a specific certification for perinatal mental health that a lot of people, I'm one of the people who hold them, but a lot of people hold it, which just shows a level of proficiency around perinatal mental health and trauma. And so, looking for folks who have that, or other people who have at least had training in the area, because I do think that you will have a much better experience with someone who has specific training in the area of perinatal mental health, as opposed to someone who's just had a child themselves. Because I think your individual experience is one thing to draw off of, but having a whole body of knowledge and information is going to be more valuable for sure. So finding that right fit of that person, and being able to recognize when you could use a little outside support, and just recognizing that that's just really a sign of the times right now. And so there's never been a time where it's more accessible to get to people online. And so I hope more people take advantage of it, even though down the road offices will continue to open back up. I really do think more people will stay online than previous because they've seen how effective it can be, including with Brainspotting, because yes, I do Brainspotting online with people.
Wonderful. And just to kind of go back to touching on the Postpartum Support International and the perinatal mental health piece, we were talking kind of as we got started about the term birth giver. And I just wondered if you would comment on that and kind of recap where that comes from and why that's so important.
Yeah. So a lot of people will ask me why I try to use gender neutral terms. And, some of that has come through just client experience. And I also had a wonderful experience at the International Conference for Postpartum Support International last year. One of the keynote speakers was actually a transgender male who had given birth on a national stage. He had made a lot of media outlets because he gave birth, and he talked to us just about his overall experience, about the mental health piece associated with that, and just recognizing that the population as a whole is incredibly vulnerable in lots of different ways and have a higher risk of things like suicide or, having people be violent towards them. And so for me in my own work, it felt like if I want to be an ally, that I had to make a decision of whether or not terminology was going to be that important to me. And so for me, I chose to say, you know what? Where I can use gender neutral language, I'm going to choose to, and it is intentional. And so, what I think some people feel threatened by at times is it's not meant to be a replacement. It's not meant to take away the word mom or mother or breastfeeding. It's meant to add to the words that we already use. Because if you have a client who comes in who either sees themselves gender neutrally or is transgendered or has any other combination of gender fluidity, you want to be able to at least have that knowledge to respond to the person with the language they'd feel most comfortable with. They don't need to feel alienated, and they don't need to have to educate you about their group. So we talk about cultural competence. And so I think it's important, as any marginalized community comes forward and says, hey, these are our preferences. These are the words we want you to use, or this is the approach that you want to take. If you're going to engage as an ally, you're going to listen. And you're going to implement that in both your practice and your trainings and your interactions. And you're going to accept that as part of all the different options of words that you could choose when describing the birth process. And for me, the benefits far outweighed whatever costs with language. But there are times that I'm challenged with it, and people do ask, like, what? Why would you do that? And the bottom line is that if somebody comes in and needs your support and you are not able to even hear or see who they are, you cannot help them. And so be an ally or know your limits. And if your limits are that, I just cannot get behind these terminologies or this language, then you need to make a point that when you get a referral that doesn't fit within your framework of expertise, that you make a point to refer them out and that you help them get with somebody who is able to push through any discomfort they have and be able to embrace terminology, words, and approach that the group is asking of you, whether that's someone transgender or a totally different culture or a different race or any other combination of who we may see in our offices. I feel like it's an ethical imperative, but everybody needs to be honest with themselves and either embrace this or refer out.
Thank you so much for diving into that and shining a light on something. It's so important. And, there's that word again, listen.
It's the theme.
It's a theme.
Yes.
So when you think about, I have this pretty typical question that I ask, what steals your joy and how do you get it back? And I wonder if you chat about that for a minute, kind of within the realm of a parent trying to, do their best during the pandemic.
For sure. I think expectations of the way things are supposed to be steals joy. And so the way our kids are supposed to be dressed, or the way the house is supposed to look, or the schedule we were supposed to keep, or the way our kid was supposed to act, that we have all these different expectations, and some of them come from ourselves and some of them come outside of ourselves. And so I think parenting anytime is not easy. Parenting now is unprecedented. And so I think being able to be a little bit more flexible with our expectations and being more reasonable with what we can do within a given day or time frame or week, and being able to release whatever judgment may come from that, from the people around you and the judgment you have on yourself. I think that that's what steals joy, is that, oh, it should have been this way, or I can't believe that the glass of water spilled over and now I have to clean it up everywhere. Or, you threw up on that dress and we were supposed to wear that, right? There's so many different things that come up in our lives that don't go the way we had hoped. And I feel like that has just been expanded exponentially with COVID-19. And so, really being able to bring things back to what's really most important to me, what really needs to happen today. And remembering above all, relationships are more important than anything else. It's more important than how your house looks or what your kid's wearing or how your kid acted. Is preserving the relationship and preserving the connection with your child, with your family. And that if that is your priority and focusing on that, that is going to help bring that joy back, because instead of being tied to this didn't happen the way we wanted it to, it's like, and we're going to figure out how to make the best of it anyway.
Beautiful. And that, I think that there's also that toggling between, right? Like there can be something terrible happening. You might read the news, you might be personally affected, but also, that invitation to not forget that joy is there.
Completely. And nothing is permanent, especially with children. I mean, if you also try to remember, this is just a moment, right? So if your kid's having a complete, utter meltdown and all you want to do is join them in their tantrum, that there is a point to turn things around. And that point might be 5 minutes away. It might be an hour away. It might be a day away. In my family, we really try to focus on the rebound. That's what we call it. It's like we can fall down, but we get back up. Or that might have gone not at all as we had wanted it to, but how do we get back on track? And trying to focus on that, and then keeping that love, connection, and relationship in the front. I think that's how you re-access the joy, because sometimes things don't turn out the way you want. It can also end up better than you thought. You've got to allow it and see it through.
Do you have a joy role model?
I think my kids are my joy role model. I have twin girls, and just watching, they're so very different from one another, and just watching kids the exact same age at going through things at the exact same time, but experiencing things so differently. And just, when you're a kid, everything's amazing. And so just watching them read a book with a funny line and just bust out in giggles for 20 minutes. And then reread it to each other because it's so funny to them, right? It's the simple things, and just remembering them getting a ribbon off a gift is a big deal to them. The small things are the big things. And so they remind me of that, especially now, dealing with coronavirus. We usually get through hard things by focusing on what we have to look forward to. And it's a lot harder right now to find things to look forward to. And so they bring me right back in the moment of this ribbon can be really amazing. And that line in that book was really hilarious, because right now the small things are the big things. And so seeing them for what they are. And so just, every moment isn't perfect, but it is beautiful the times that you have those just busting out gut laughter, over the silliest thing. It just brings me back to, that's what this is about. This is about just being in the moment and enjoying it, and just being together and being present with the laughter, and just letting that be, even if it feels like the world's falling apart around us. Right here, right now, we're just going to sit here and laugh together. And this really is funny.
There it is. So powerful. So powerful. And, just another natural resource that we have within us, right? It's free. It comes built in. We just have to activate it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so Jana, how can our listeners find you?
Yes. So my website is www.supportivesolutionsga.com. So you can find me there, and love to answer any follow-up questions people have about perinatal mental health or perinatal trauma or brain spotting or anything else that we may have covered today. I'd be happy to answer any individual questions or help people find resources or support. This is an important time in people's lives. And like we said, this is kind of unprecedented. And so if you need support, we want to help you get it.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful. I've enjoyed our time together.
Thank you for listening to The Joy Factor. For more information, visit www.thejoyfactorpodcast.com.